Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and start up with chapter 6. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And here we're going to be looking at our teaching methods, because there's more than one way to get our message across to our students. And so, because of differing learning styles, we may want to try more than one thing in order to be successful. So let's take a look at what chapter 6 has to offer us here. Obviously, if you're going to be a teacher, you're going to need some good communication skills. Our voices need to be able to carry. We need to be able to use good English whenever we talk to people. Definitely we don't want to be using any kind of profanity in the classroom. Although, let's be realistic, we hear it all the time outside the classroom, in the hallways. But your book talks about 3 nice and easy to remember elements of communication. And this takes place when people talk or communicate to each other. And I think we can almost also broaden this to just more than just people talking to each other, carrying on a conversation, either in person, on the phone, or whatever. These elements still carry over whenever we do emails or written correspondence. So the first point or bullet underneath this is that there's got to be a communicator. Somebody has to have something to say and initiate that conversation, going in one direction to somebody who's ready to listen to it. Then the second bullet is the symbols. Like I said before, let's not limit ourselves to just verbal communication. You and I will type up an email, put our thoughts down on a computer screen or on paper, whatever, and then send that over to somebody who needs to read it, or a number of people who need to read it. Unfortunately, what will happen sometimes is that even whenever we write what we want people to read, it's not clear. I just this day had a discussion with a couple of my colleagues, and we were sitting around the table just kind of talking, and one of them mentioned about an email that they got from somebody, and it was so bad that they couldn't understand it, and they gave it to somebody else to read, and they were confused. Obviously, if we've got information we want to pass on to somebody, we don't want to confuse them any worse than what they already are. They're looking for answers. So we need to really be very careful whenever we write information to people, to be very clear and concise in our message. Now, symbols can also be used on the verbal side. You and I use all kinds of words and excuse me, keywords that we assume that people understand, rightly or wrongly. At school, we have our own terminology. When somebody talks about a CTS, TCA, Carl Perkins, we all know what we're talking about. Just this week, we have a new instructor that's just starting at my campus. Well, this guy told me during his first day of kind of like an orientation that his head was spinning with all the new terms that he had to learn, that we just don't think twice about it. Obviously, 1 year from now, after he makes his first year of teaching, we'll all laugh about that first day. But obviously, we're going to have to work with him and kind of explain what we're talking about so the man will learn our terminology. And we use all kinds of phrases in just everyday communication with our friends, with our families, that convey some meanings. And it's not only just the words, it's also our body language can also be a very powerful communication device. How we stand, how we look, our facial expressions. Any teacher that's been teaching long enough, that's standing in front of a classroom and you start getting this look of total blankness, obviously that's a clue that something didn't connect in those students' minds. And so it's time to kind of back up and see if we can do it right the next time. I had another one of those issues with some payroll math. Evidently I did more to mess up the situation with this particular group, because I mean they were just totally confused at the end of class. And so we took a day off, said don't do anything tonight. When we come back the next day, we're going to try this again. And today it was much, much easier. We weren't muddied, we were a whole lot more focused. But those symbols, certainly I could have just kept on going and not looked back. But what good would that have done? Wouldn't have prepared them for whenever they're going to take a full-blown class in payroll. So we need to be very, very focused on the symbology that we use to communicate. And finally, there's got to be a receiver. Somebody has got to be there ready and waiting to listen or to read what it is we have to communicate. Now, obviously the listener needs to be focused on what we're trying to get across to them. They need to be prepared to listen and to receive that message. But once they receive it, the roles can get reversed, and the receiver becomes the communicator. And we can flip-flop roles back and forth many, many times during a conversation. And so communication is a two-way street. And I keep getting on my students to talk to me. And by that I mean for them to ask questions. And somehow or another, I don't know about your students, but it's like it's a bad thing to ask a question. Nobody asks a question whenever you can see blank looks on their faces, but nobody's willing to ask. And I wish I had an answer for that, other than you and I just have to be cognizant of kind of reading the body language of our students to make sure that they're clear in what it is we're trying to get across to them. The next slide talks about some communication techniques, and you and I can really tap into these things and make it work for us. obviously the language that we use. I hate to kind of get on my high horse about some things, but there's no excuse for you and I to talk like our students talk. Maybe we want to identify with them. Maybe we want to become part of them. Look, we're not their friends. We're not their parents. We're their teachers. We fulfill a very critical role in their lives. But we need to maintain a professional kind of distance between our students, and we need to be able to speak in a way that kind of separates us from them, so that they will kind of want to emulate us, not vice versa. Voice control is another thing that we can use. If all you do is stand up in front of the classroom and all you do is speak in a monotone, don't expect your students to last very long. You'll put them to sleep better than any kind of sleeping medicine. And let's face it, imagine it if you had to listen to somebody speak and never use any kind of inflections in their voice. I mean, that would be worse than some kind of Chinese water torture. But you and I need to vary our levels of voice to kind of wake our students up sometimes, kind of break the monotony. And certainly your enthusiasm for your course content can help you in your voice control by just trying to pass on that enthusiasm and your love and passion for your area of study. Can just kind of help draw them in to feeling the same way about it. And our bodily actions. Okay, do you want to be planted like a rose bush behind your podium and never move? I know some teachers, even at my campus, that have themselves a chair and they sit behind that podium and they never move from it. That would be a killer for me. I got to get around and move around the classroom. I may sit down at a chair, an empty chair, and just kind of keep talking, or else I'm going to walk around that room, see what's going on, see if my students are texting or watching videos while I'm talking, or I just have to move around. And if anybody has ever been around me any amount of time, they'll also know that I also kind of use my hands and everything else whenever I talk. And so it's like I'm sometimes just going wild up there in the classroom, and the students are not knowing what to expect. But that's kind of like my game plan. I want to keep them on edge. I want them focused. And so I kind of use those bodily actions to kind of make that happen for me. Now, your personality may be totally different. You might feel comfortable behind a podium or a lectern, but I would highly encourage you and recommend that you get around the classroom, move around. Of course, stay within the line of sight of all your students. If you're talking, also try to watch yourself so that you don't have your back turned on them, because if you've taught any amount of time, bad things happen whenever you turn your back on students. But yet, get a feel for your lines of sight in there, how you can kind of see what they're doing, but yet keep them guessing what you're going to do. And then finally, eye contact. There is almost nothing as powerful when you're communicating and you look eye to eye with a student and you're focused on them. Now, don't just focus on just one of them. Spread it around. As you walk around that room, look at those students. Look them in the eye. And make sure that they make eye contact with you. Like that, they're going to know that you are on task and that they need to be on task. And that they need to be thinking, because who's to say that you just won't pop a question out to them and see if they can answer it. So maintain eye contact with them. Now, let's talk about some instructional techniques. The first, and probably the oldest, is the lecture technique. That goes all the way back to Socrates there in ancient Greece, when he would go out there and take some of these noblemen's boys out and just pass on all of his wisdom and all of his knowledge to them, and basically began the first college thousands of years ago. And guess what? Today we're still doing the same thing. Obviously the times have changed, the content's changed, the venues in which these things take place change, but yet it's still the same situation. A teacher is passing on information to a student. Now, there are two types, a formal lecture and an informal. And really the difference between the two is that you deals with preparation. For a formal lecture, you'll have yourself a lesson plan, very similar to something that to the one that y'all did for me the other day in chapter 5, where you have all of your resources and everything that you need to say kind of typed up or there in front of you, and you just proceed to use those resources to get this lecture done. An informal lecture, I guess my best example that I could give of that is like in developmental education. Let's say I've got a classroom of students that are kind of doing fractions one day, and I notice 3 or 4 of them are having problems, let's say adding and subtracting fractions. Well, I'm not going to go grab my lesson plan for that, because I don't even have one with my Play-Doh system. And so what I'll do is just go to the board and maybe grab those 3 students, say, come with me, let's go to the blackboard, and I'm going to show you how to find your least common denominators, and let's add some fractions. Y'all give me some problems to do, and we'll just go to the blackboard or go to the smart board, and we will do some problems. Nothing that I've prepared for, no organization on it, other than just to answer their questions. Sometimes I think sometimes those are the better lectures that I've ever done, because it's spontaneous, because it's really what the student is looking for. Then obviously we have also the formal lecture, which is important if we're going to get that content passed on to the student, and we only have 15 weeks to get it done, or else 180 days, whatever it is. So we've got to have some way to pass that information on to the students, and the lecture method is a good way to do it. Now, the next one is the guided discussion method. I've not used this one a whole lot, So I can't give you a whole lot of personal experience with this thing. But the guided discussion method, it works for a lot of, let's say, English classes, maybe more towards the liberal arts, perhaps, where you're talking about things. You're introducing, as the first bulleted point says, you're doing an introduction. You're introducing maybe something new. But what's critical about this instructional method is the D word, discussion. If you're going to have a bunch of students that are going to do nothing but keep their mouths shut and look at you, you're not going to have a whole lot of success with this one. You've got to have a group of students that are willing to express their points of view. And not just one or two. That whole group has to be able to and want to take part. And I guess the closest thing that I've ever really come to this wasn't as a teacher. Well, I don't know, maybe so. I remember in grad school, during the summertime, they'd always give us a 1-hour seminar class where, during the 9 weeks or 10 weeks, whatever it was for the summer, every one of us grad students had to do a lesson a week. One week it was me, one week it was Dr. McDaniel, one week it was somebody else. And so we presented a lesson that day, and we basically taught the professors and also all the other grad students about something, whatever we were assigned or had volunteered to go over. And so obviously we had a whole lot of discussion because those people there were willing to ask questions and to make comments and to disagree with you many times. And that's another thing that you need to be concerned about with the discussion method. Don't expect all of your students to agree with what you say. Now, that can be a good thing, but it can also be chaos too. So be careful. Be very, very judicious on how you use this one, because it's risky, I guess, for lack of a better term, but with risk comes great reward. So be willing to take a hit with this method and be willing to take the chaos that might take place in your classroom with it. But yet, if it ever works, you may not want class to end, because there can be a whole lot of learning taking place with this particular discussion method. And finally, you've got to draw and pull everything to a conclusion, because this thing could just go on and on and on and on and on. So introduce the information, discuss it, inside, outside, everywhere in between, but then say, okay, let's wrap this up. This is it. Conclusion. So that's the guided discussion method. Now, the next one is probably the one that's most near and dear to my heart: teaching by demonstration. As an old vocational educator, this is how I was taught to teach. You show somebody how to do it. And as an old drafting instructor, I would get up there on a drafting board, have all my students gather around the board, and I would show them step by step by step by step what they had to do. And then let them do it. Then we'd go on to the next skill. I would show them step by step by step, and then let them do it. And what this does is it really stimulates the visual learners. And most people are visual learners. And so like that, they can see something done in front of them and then try to mimic those things. Now, on the flip side, you want to get embarrassed very, very quickly. You have a demonstration go wrong. And that example was never more clearly demonstrated, pardon the pun here, than a number of years ago. Some administrators in our region wanted to come do a faculty meeting and I guess give us a lesson on teamwork. And so one of the presenters wanted to show us the power of teamwork. And so this individual proceeded to take some styrofoam cups and arrange them in about 4 rows of 4. I think there were 16 cups. And they had a little piece of plywood that they put on top of the cups. And they demonstrated, I can take one of these cups, put it down there, put my foot on it, it's crushed, no good. But yet the more cups we got, it'll hold a whole lot of weight. And so that person proceeded to step on those cups. And what do you think happened? They all smashed like some eggs. Now, there was dead silence after that took place. And then it's like one person just couldn't hold it back anymore. We started laughing and laughing till we cried. To look at that presenter's face and they said, well, it worked this morning when I tried it as I was preparing for this. Well, guess what? Usually whenever things are going to go wrong, it's when they need to go right. You need to be prepared for a demonstration. You need to have practiced. You need to know what it is you want to do, and what it is you want your students to do. So this is one of the most important teaching techniques in vocational education. Use it, do it all the time. But you need to be prepared. You've got to get yourself ready so that they see it done right the first time, so that they can then get their skill levels up to where you want them to be. The next one is the performance method. This is pretty much just telling students this is the performance that you need to meet. And I guess I can kind of use our welding program as an example. Whenever welders are going to get ready to go out there and go to work, let's say the plants in Lake Charles are having a turnaround, and they want to go to work out there during that maybe 5-month, 6-month turnaround. Well, first thing that welder's going to have to do is go out there and test. They will weld some pieces of metal together, and that employer is going to go out there and test those welds, and if they meet their specifications, chances are they're hired. But they have to reach a standard of performance. You just can't do it once and get it done. I guess another example would be our PCTs. As they go through the drawing of blood, and one of the criteria for them to pass is to stick and be successful 100 times. So we have people coming in from all over the place going out there and getting stuck by these PCT students. Well, that instructor is watching every one of those sticks. Say, okay, that's a good one. Nope, sorry, that's a bad one. Try again on the other arm. But they have a standard of performance that they have to reach in order to be successful. And many of our other programs in secondary and post-secondary vocational education are kind of built on that. The other types of instructional techniques, I want to kind of draw your attention to the first one in that short list: individualized instruction. I don't know how many of you may have been familiar with the old trade schools in Louisiana. When I was hired as a drafting instructor, I went to work at a trade school. And the trade schools in Louisiana utilize an individualized instruction. You didn't take classes or schedule classes. You were enrolled in a program. And that whole program was designed from the most basic of skills, and they brought you through chapter by chapter, skill by skill, until you got to the point where you were ready to graduate and go to work. And this kind of individualized instruction was self-paced. A student could start tomorrow and begin their program of study. And they would follow through with these structured lessons, and pretty much all the teacher had to do was to work one-on-one with students. And what was difficult was that if you had a class of 20, you had 20 people in 20 different places. And I found that very difficult to do coming from a secondary environment. But once I got a feel for the whole program, stopped looking at it as singular lessons, and sort of looked at the bigger picture of the whole program, it began to be one of the best ways I have ever experienced to teach students. And I'll be frank, I'm very sad to have seen this system go away, because I believe that it had a whole lot of merit to it. Because a student who could pick up on a skill could move through this program a whole lot faster than somebody that maybe needed more time. And that's the thing. We had a whole lot of students that didn't get it the first time, maybe didn't get it the second time, but by the third time they got it. And we were able to give them that time to build their skill, rather than have to move on because we only have 13 weeks of study. We didn't have semesters. Well, I shouldn't say that. We were at one time on a quarter system, but it didn't matter. You paid a full-time tuition, you paid a part-time tuition, and you just started from day one of that quarter and moved as fast as you could through that quarter. And when you finished, you took a week off, and we came back and we started where you left it off. And I just thought that it was just a wonderful way to teach, and gave some success to students that wouldn't normally have had success in a more traditional classroom. Because many of our students at one time didn't even have to have high school diplomas or GEDs to come to school. So I'm a big fan of individualized instruction, and would really love to see it revived again in the technical college system. Discussion method variations. There are all kinds of discussion method variations, from a buzz session to a very structured discussion where you just limit yourself to one topic. Everybody gets a chance to comment, and then you just move on to the next topic. Everybody has a chance to say their piece. Sometimes that's kind of called a Delphi method. And they have their place. Certainly it's great if you want to discuss something that's relevant, like a current event, or maybe some kind of scenario. What are you going to do if a customer comes in with their car broken for the third time by one of your employees? Have a good discussion on that. What are you going to do if they're irate? They're going to call their lawyer. And get all kind of good discussion going on with that. But you need, as we said before, you need to be focused with it. Programmed instruction. Programmed instruction has been around since the 50s. In fact, my former professor, Dr. James McMurray from LSU, was one of the earliest adopters and researchers in programmed instruction. And so back in the 60s, we had these learning machines. It kind of sat on your lap, and then you had a question, and you flipped through it, got the answer, and then you got immediate feedback. Yes, this is right. And then you moved on to the next question. And so it just wanted to help build your confidence, build your ability to learn by giving you positive reinforcement. Well, today the technology has changed 1,000-fold, and we're still doing the same thing to a great extent with distance learning, where we're sort of laying out the program and giving a student feedback real quick. Plato, with our developmental ed program, we used it for about 10 years. It was a strictly behavioral type of program. The students got immediate feedback on their answers, and they were able to then move on with their developmental studies. There are other programs that do very, very similar things, put out by a lot of software vendors. And so programmed instruction hasn't gone away. In fact, now it's reached, you can say, a new level of sophistication. And finally, cooperative learning. This is a wonderful thing that at the secondary level, and also has beginning to start taking root there in the technical college system, where a student will contract with an employer and go out there and learn on the job. A wonderful way to increase their knowledge and skills in anything. Because let's face it, who of us, whenever we go to work, don't learn something new? And so I'm really happy to see that type of learning environment being utilized by a lot of students in a lot of different program areas, and hopefully we're going to see even more of that in the future. But they are put with people who are experts in what they do. They work in a job on-the-job environment, and they can really get a feel for what it's like out there in that occupation that they're choosing. Now, what about questions? Questions are, I guess, a double-edged sword. They can either cut you or cut something else. They can really cut to measuring student knowledge by asking questions. But then they can cut you and me by allowing students to kind of get off task with their answers. And especially whenever you got the class clown that's going to answer something stupid and get everybody laughing, and then very, very quickly you got to do one or two things before things kind of get out of hand, you know, bring them back to where they need to be and get the right answer, or else, you know, everybody can just go out there and have a good laugh. But different types of questions. The overhead question is where you just throw that question out there. Just pick your head up and throw it out there and see where it lands. Then your direct question is where you ask Johnny or Susie, what do you think about this? Or what's the answer to this question? Rhetorical question is where you just basically ask a question and you are looking for any kind of answer. The reverse question is where you give out the answer and they ask the question. That's a little different. I've never been that good at doing that. But questioning is a wonderful tool for you and I to use to be able to keep our students on their toes. First of all, we want to ask questions to kind of gauge their knowledge. I'll usually throw out a few questions before I begin doing my lessons, just to kind of see if the students have kind of been doing their homework, or else if they are unclear about a few things, and just kind of get things warmed up. And then when I start into my lecturing or to my demonstrating, I start asking direct questions to Johnny or Susie or Jane or Paul, whoever, and see if they're on their toes, if they're paying attention. And I expect a direct answer. You know, it's not going to be choose A, B, C, or D. There's usually a one answer, and that's it. Now, the book kind of gives you these techniques. You want to ask the question, throw it out there, then pause, and then you start. Then everybody starts looking away, or looking at each other and saying, "Who's he going to call on? Who's he going to call on? Hope he doesn't call on me." And then you call on the student. You put them on the hot seat. Then you listen to their answer. And look, even in the worst of circumstances, there may be some shred of correctness or truth in what that student's going to tell you. And so instead of saying, "Shame on you, you stupid student," that's the wrong answer, you ought to know better than that. You need to kind of turn it around so that you, I wouldn't want to say chastise them, but yet at least you give some kind of feedback to them that's saying, okay, maybe that's not all correct, but here's what you said, and now let's add a little more to it to get the right answer. And then, you know, I've had students ask me, I ask a question to them, and they were totally wrong. But then I'll come back with maybe another, with the question maybe worded a different way to them. Or I just kind of move back to maybe something more basic and ask them that question again and let them answer it right. Because we really want them to give us the right answers, but we want to give them that positive reinforcement, because if they answer the question right and we give them that positive reinforcement that they did it right, very good job, that helps to build, getting back to Maslow, a foundation that this student's going to start thinking, well, hey, I can do this. I can learn this. Because how many times are people told you can't do this by people? This is way beyond you. You'll never do this. Never. You're no good. You can't do this. You know, let's be maybe the only people that give positive reinforcement to these people in their lives. And so let's give them, and sometimes we've got to dig kind of deep to get it, but let's build them up as much as we can instead of tearing them down. Now, what about some instructional aids? Man, has technology really changed the way we do things. Some of these things I probably need to go in and redo the slide, because some of this stuff is almost out of date. You can't even find this stuff anymore. But some aids that you and I can use, a chalkboard or a whiteboard. I guess we can also add a smart board or Promethean board to go out there and write on. If we have stuff that we want to demonstrate to students, let's say in an English class or a math class, put them on the board and let them copy it down. Or else, if we've got information that students need for a test, we can write them on the board and let them copy it to their notebooks. But a chalkboard and whiteboard are essential equipment in a classroom so we can communicate in the written form. Mock-ups. Many vocational labs have mock-ups, or actually live equipment, the real thing. I know in our diesel classroom, we have 2 engines that if they wanted to, they can stick them in a 18-wheeler, because they are the exact same engines that power those particular tractor trailers. So our students get to work on the exact same things that they would see in industry. Many of the auto mechanics programs have cars that have been damaged, especially by floods, that many dealers will donate to them. Well, these were fully functioning cars. They're not good for the road anymore, but they are wonderful instructional aids that students can go in, tear down, put back together. Charts. In the age of computers, we're starting to see fewer and fewer charts, but way back when, every classroom had a whole lot of flip charts for teachers to show pictures and to draw student attention since they were visual. Film strips and slides. Be quite honest, these things look like they are extinct. It's all been changed to video, YouTube videos. I don't know where I could even find a film strip projector, or better yet, a slide projector. but yet at one time that's what we used all the time. Another one is transparencies. I think PowerPoint has pretty much destroyed the transparency and the overhead projector. I have one overhead projector in my classroom, and all it's doing is collecting dust. In fact, I'd need to go throw it in the trash bin at school, because I don't know what I'd use it for, and I don't have any transparencies. All of my things are instructional aids or PowerPoints. Videos and films. When I taught drafting, I was on a mailing list for a company that would provide free films to classrooms, and all you had to do was select the title. They'd mail you the film. You'd keep it for so many days, and then pay the postage to mail it back. I did that because this library had a wonderful bunch of films on what happened in industry. And so I would show that to my drafting students to show them, okay, this is what they do on the job. I remember one of the films was how they were building this bridge out in Nevada. And so they got to see how concrete is poured. They got to see all of this earth-moving equipment. The surveyors taking drawings that some draftsman did, and they were working off of that. So it was just to kind of broaden their horizons to the world of work. Well, I don't know if you and I could really find a 16mm projector today. It's all videos. And what's wonderful is that they are very high quality videos. And I don't know about y'all, I used to think YouTube was a waste of time, but now I find some really good videos, instructional videos out there. Obviously, you got to go out there and watch it to make sure that it's a good one. But if you got the time to sit down and look and listen, you can find some good stuff out there that somebody's done, and it's free. I mean, why pay $5,000 for a set of videos whenever somebody's made them for free that do just as well? I think that's a no-brainer there. Computers. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't really know of one piece of technology that has changed things in our lifetime than this type of machine. I can remember the first computer that I ever saw. It was the size of a suitcase, and all it was I guess comparable to the laptop we had today. It had a keyboard, had a phone modem jack, and the computer science professor from UL, as he was demonstrating it to us in high school, did some real basic math on it and plotted out some stuff. We thought that was the greatest thing we ever saw. Thing is, it probably had the computing power of well, maybe your coffee maker. Well, today it's just amazing what we can do with iPads, smartphones, and the technology is constantly changing. And so who's to say what's going to happen 50 years from now with computers in the classroom? But they have made a tremendous impact on how we teach. Audio and visual recorders. I have a video recorder at school, From time to time, some of the teachers use it to make their own videos. They give them to me, and I use the software that came with the camera to download it to a computer and get it into a format that they can use. Our truck drivers have made a number of videos for their pre-trip and lessons that they teach. And what's nice is that it's what they want. It's not what somebody else came up with. And it's not that big of a thing to do. Audio, I'm kind of doing that right now. I got a PowerPoint going on. I'm talking into a microphone, recording all of this. Hopefully in the next couple of days, you're going to be hearing this and listening to it. And you'll hopefully learn something. And finally, printed instructional aids. I print out a lot of things, a lot of worksheets. I have a production printer. But my big problem right now is basically my paper budget. I can't exactly print anything and everything that I want, so I have to kind of be very careful. And I don't know, maybe y'all are in the same boat with your budgets. But printed instructional aids are a wonderful tool to help teach. Every student's got one. They can refer to it. And identify what you think is important with that instructional aid. And I know our nurses use them quite a bit, especially whenever they're trying to teach anatomy. You'll see the students with their printed pictures of whatever part of the body, like the heart or the lung or something like that, and they got all the lines, and they got to go fill in the blanks to what the parts are. A wonderful study aid, a wonderful teaching aid. So those aren't going to go away either. So this wraps up chapter 6. And so before I close, I do want you all to read the article that I have for you. I searched long and hard to find something like it, and prior classes have just had a whole lot to say about this this article. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. I'll leave you that for you to discover. But it's been the best forum topic that I've ever had in this class right here when I've taught it. So I'm looking forward to reading your responses to it, because I think it's a good read. I think you'll enjoy it. So we'll see. And look, please tell me if you don't like it, because I want to hear that too. So I'll go ahead and close, stop the recording, and I'll have chapter 7 up in a few days.